it does feel like you are flying a plane while serving the customers on the plane as well, on top of fixing the plane at the same time. I was hoarding information for years, and I think one thing that BiggerPockets talk about, they talk like the analysis paralysis, and I definitely felt that because I'm overloaded with information, but I haven't taken any real steps towards it. Every interview afterwards, I always look back and I'm like, okay, what didn't go well? Being clear with the communication and the expectations up front really does help move the process along. I like to break it down into, I think I said 4 pillars, right? The first one is leasing. The next one is tenant maintenance relationships. Third one, obviously, is finance department, accounting. The last one is legal. We've hired a couple of people for the leasing office. So 80% of the job is pretty much in the leasing office. That's usually the majority of the work that you have to do in property management.
Welcome to the Kaizen Blueprint, the podcast dedicating to helping you achieve a better life through continuous improvement. If you're ready to elevate your finances, grow your investment, and unlock your full potential, you're in the right place. Each episode brings an expert insight on personal development, finance, and real estate, giving you the tools to build lasting success. Now, let's go to today's episode. All right, Wes, welcome to the Kaizen Blueprint podcast. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Good. I know we're just rolling, so this is just a preliminary introduction, but we briefly, you mentioned that you started in real estate during the COVID era. So what kind of kick you started? Where were you at the time, and how did the real estate thing come alive?
Yeah, so it actually started a little bit before then. So I graduated college in 2017. I went to Rutgers, went to engineering school, got my degree in material science engineering, and I was like, oh, this is the path forward, right? Because for most people, growing up in a very traditional Asian household, I guess specifically Chinese, we know, hey, you're good at either math or science, and then you kind of just go with that until you can get a nice W-2 job. And so I just chose that. I was good at problem solving. I was good at when I say good at, I just had a really good affinity with, problem solving and chemistry. So I'm like, you know what, let's just do, something chemical engineering related, and I landed on material science. So it's just something that really clicked with me, which really helped. And then once I got my job, I remember I got my first job actually, and 6 months in, I remember I was in my apartment, just in my bed. I remember the alarm just going off, and it's 8 a.m. I'm like, oh God, this cannot be the rest of my life. So that's why I started. I remember my commute to my job was a 20-minute commute. So I would listen to podcasts like BiggerPockets and other audio books and things like that on 2 times speed. So I would finish half the podcast driving there, and then the other half coming back, I'll finish the rest of the podcast.
Okay.
At 2 times speed. So just to try to get as much information as possible. And that was between 2017, and by 2019, I was oh, I have all this knowledge now, and I actually want to do something with it. It's so I started to just venture out on my own, started calling realtors, started calling, just signs that I saw on the side of the road. I'll call them, just to try something out, because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have any, mentors at the time. And a lot of my friends that I had at the time, they weren't doing anything like this either. So I was and just, this is my own personality. I like to try things out and, make the mistakes and then learn from them. And then all of a sudden, really, I finally found a realtor I really liked, and this is when I was living in Colorado now. So I moved from Pennsylvania to Colorado for another job, another engineering job. But once I moved there, I think finding that first realtor is super important, because they will guide you, but making sure it's the right personality, as opposed to, will they find you the best deal? Will they find you these things? Not necessarily, especially, for your first deal. It's way more important to find a good fit, to someone that you can communicate with, because I remember that first deal was super scary for me. So that's why, even though it was an MLS, very easy, single family home, very, I remember being freaked out the entire time. And so that's why having that is really, really well.
So let's kick it back a little bit. That was a lot, right? It's all good. So when you got the engineering job, you start listening to BiggerPockets podcast, but what triggered that getting, because you can't just go online and be like real estate, and then maybe BiggerPockets pop up now because of how popular he has got over the years. But what made you start listening to podcasts specifically for real estate?
Yeah, yeah. So like I remember just being in that time, I knew that the W-2 was just not the final form of like what I wanted. And so I did research on my own, just figuring out what are ways to make money with the least amount of effort. I think for most people, I think that's just my engineer brain going off, where it's like most efficient way, right?
Mm.
And there was a couple things that came up: stocks, bonds. Sorry, I keep hitting. Oh God, I hear you. Yes, stocks, bonds, real estate. Those are the things that came up when I was searching. I'm like, well, I don't really understand stocks or bonds that well because it's not like tangible.
Sure.
It's not. And, when you buy real estate, at least if you ever need a place to live, you can actually live at that house that you bought,
Right.
worst case scenario. So I'm like, it makes sense. Let's just go and do that then. So that's why I first dove into real estate.
Yeah, makes sense. Because I remember when I first dabble into real estate, I didn't like dabble in real estate specifically and seriously at that time when I first learned about real estate. It's that when I was 13 or 14 or maybe like 16, like somewhere around that teens age, I was looking up how to make money.
Mm.
And real estate was always what the wealthy people, what the rich people own. So, but when you're at that age, and my parents, right, they did house hacking, but without house hacking, if that makes sense. When we first came to America, we live in a 800 square foot home, which is really small, and it was a 3 beds and 1 bath. And what happens is, even though my parents could have their own room and I could have my own room, what happens is all three of us was sleeping in the primary bedroom, and we were renting out the other two and paid off the mortgage. And that was like 2005, 2006. And now people are calling house hacking. Back then they call it like just landlording or just paying off the mortgage. But yeah, I mean, that kind of triggered into the real estate aspect where, okay, what is the best way to make a lot of money while at the same time you don't have a lot of money and you kind of leverage the mortgage, which we'll dive deeper next.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's nice that you have like a role model, like someone who's actually was doing like, obviously, I don't know if your parents were doing it because they were looking to invest.
No, there was necessity.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was gonna say, yeah, I'm sure it was more of a necessity. So, but like, yeah, like having, I guess, an accidental role model, right, of like how it could be. Yeah, like both my parents were, just regular W-2 workers, and whatnot. So a lot of my sphere of just growing up, like no one was doing any of this kind of stuff, and I didn't really know anyone who I could talk with or like even see do these things, do like business and real estate. So that said, like I think growing up, it was like really up to me to figure out all these things, and only I feel like more recently have I actually now can reach out to people and have mentors in that space.
Yeah, it's insane. When we first started, we're like the black sheep. And how old were you when 2017, or the times that you were listening to BiggerPockets?
Yeah, yeah, I was like 20, 21.
Yeah, there are not a lot of 20 year olds who are listening to or investing in or potentially investing in real estate at that time. So you were kind of the black sheep within your environment, that you were different. You wanted to do something better and you want to grow and you want to build wealth. And people at that age group typically are in fraternities, sororities, partying up, living their best life. And once they realize college is about to end soon, they're like, "Oh crap! Like, what do I do now?"
Right. Yeah. It does feel like that a lot, Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I was also doing all those things too, but that said, I knew that it was something I knew going in, like the college, like, hey, this is like means to an end kind of thing. It's like I know that I'll get the
Like a stepping
degree.
stone.
Yeah, I'll get the degree, I'll get the job that gives me a steady income, but then I know it in the future afterwards, like what is the next step. And it never occurred to me that would be in like business necessarily. I thought it was more so, hey, I'll get some couple houses, and get it done in terms of, just regular landlord things. And then I think I became, how people call it, like accidental landlord. I think I became like an accidental like business because a lot of people started asking me to like help them with this kind of stuff. Then I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll help you out. And then that grows and grows and grows. And then, here we are.
So let's kick it back when you were in Colorado, right? Because you went to Rutgers. I'm assuming you graduated from Rutgers.
Yeah.
And you had a engineering job there and then to Colorado?
Yeah. So I got my first job actually up in Bethlehem,
Okay.
Pennsylvania. So like an hour north of here.
Sure.
I was doing, material science stuff there, but that's when I started, researching the BiggerPockets stuff,
Sure.
not, and calling people, not until I moved to Colorado. So that's when I moved to Colorado in 2019. So that's when I really started, because I was like, hey, we should really make an effort to actually get this started. So, one thing I will say is, when you're starting by yourself, like in a vacuum kind of thing, you're only doing it. It took me 3 years to take my first action. Now I'm helping like a couple of, young guys in the office, or whatever, not, or at least people are asking me, like, they're getting their stuff done in like 6 months. I was like, dang, I wish I had someone to push me to get it. Yeah, a couple of my friends, they have their own, like, their first rental properties and whatnot. 6 months. I'm just like, wow. Like,
They need a Wes. The Wes needed a Wes back then.
exactly. But no, I'm very happy for them. I'm glad that they trusted me enough to get it done, and actually was curious enough to take those steps. But
So when you took that step, right? One, what made you take that step after a good period of time of researching? And then two, just tell us more what that first step looks like.
yeah, I think I resonate with a lot of these messages, whereas like the first step is always the scariest. Or it's like, kind of what you said earlier, I was the only person in my sphere that was doing this. A lot of it was just information on the internet.
Sure.
And it was like, and then I had to just trust myself that it was vetted. Like, it's good information. Let's just try it.
Everything on the internet is true.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, but that said, yeah, that first step, I think it was just out of frustration. I think it's because like, again, I was hoarding information for years. And I think one thing that BiggerPockets talk about, they thought like the analysis paralysis, that whether or not, I definitely felt that, because now I'm overloaded with information.
Sure.
But I haven't like taken any real steps towards it. And when I say real steps, like actually following through in terms of like getting to under contract. Just, I didn't even know what that felt like. So really my first step was creating a relationship with an agent. I think that's the real first step that most people take. And so just doing that. So I actually interviewed like, I think like 7 agents, because
What do you even ask?
yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, when I remember the first call with the first agent, I was like, hey, I'm an investor. I want to buy a house here in XYZ. And then they're like, okay, great. And looking back at it, now I realize, I'm like, this person sent me the BAC, the buyer's agency contract, right away. And they're like, we're not going to show you any houses until you sign this right here. And I was like, no, well, I'm not signing anything. You didn't explain anything,
Right.
So it was more so, again, going back to that first one I was making, the communication. I realized that every like iteration, every interview afterwards, I always look back and I'm like, okay, what went well, what didn't go well. So then one thing I'll ask is like, oh, I see some agents ask to sign a BAC. Like, do you need that right now? Or, kind of like evolving my process as we go along. So one thing that was really important to me was the communication, like the clarity, people knowing that I'm new. So you do expect someone, and I told them, I would say straight up, I expect someone to hold my hand, throughout this process, because I have no idea what I'm doing, and I know sometimes people are like, oh, like that's, you can get taken advantage of or something like that.
Yeah.
Of course, I understand that could be a possibility, but in reality, I knew I needed a lot of help. That was really more the reason why I said that. And I'm like, I need someone to hold my hand. I need someone to explain, every part of this contract to me, because, and then what I would do is I'd go back and then look it over myself, to make sure that, all the things they're saying is true, right? So that's why, like, going back to that relationship. And then after that, yeah, I think it was still very scary, still very hard, but then I finally feel like someone's actually in my corner.
Okay. So that once you find that somebody in that corner, then they help you. So you bought that first property from the, I guess, MLS in that city.
Yep. In Denver, yeah. So that was my first place. It's in Denver, and it was great. It fit all my criteria. Like, I remember that, like, my agent, I don't know if can I say her real name? Like, oh no, no, yeah. So her name's Maria. The guy, I think she works at Modern High now,
Okay.
Modern High Homes, and she's great. I would definitely work with her again. She's been amazing, and even after the sale, we still stay in contact and whatnot. And she actually helped me buy my second home too. So
Okay.
yeah,
In Denver?
also in Denver, yeah.
Okay.
So she's been there every single time, and I remember she would push me. Like sometimes she'll push me, which I asked her to. I'm like, if I'm, being a scaredy cat, where I'll just call me out, like let me know, And I think that's why that relationship's so important because being clear with the communication and the expectations up front really does help like move the process along. So I was like, hey, if I'm being like scared, just push me. Like, what should I bring to our next our next like showing, right? Like, oh, she's like,
Right.
oh, you should look into the place, look into the comps, all that stuff. I'm like, okay, I'll do that, and then I'll have that ready. So
What was that first deal look like? What was the criteria and does it fit on the criteria to make you say yes for your first ever deal?
yeah, yeah. So a lot of times, people always, ask, they're like, oh, like what makes a good deal, good deal? And I'll stick by it too. My thought, it was to not lose money. That was the only thing because I wasn't sure I wasn't sure if it would work, outside of just, oh, making money, yes, no, that kind of thing. But the second step is, am I actually fit to become a real estate investor?
Mm.
Not a lot of people think, that next step because they see the glamour of being a real estate investor. Like, oh my God, yeah, you all these houses, all this money, whatever not. Shit's hard. Shit is hard. Like, and then I come to realize that, is that's why when people ask me, like, what makes a good deal, essentially, right? So I'm like, for your first one, definitely don't lose money. That's the main thing. You can make $1. I was happy if I made like $0, right? As long as I wasn't taking anything out of my pocket to pay for this place,
But
and
that doesn't include the down payment for it, right?
well, yeah,
You're talking about just the cash flow.
the cash flow itself, yes, the actual like asset stabilization, but of course, the acquisition, I'll have that ready. You have to have that ready, right?
Right.
So, especially if it's your first deal, you should definitely do it in your personal name. Just because it's a lot easier. So, say for some reason you decide, hey, you don't want to do it anymore, it's a lot easier to unwind. And I know again, people will say, hey, you should buy an LLC, you should have like a separate account, all that stuff. I'm like, it's your first deal. Like, just feel it out, feel it out and make sure you actually like this because, once you buy make all these things, it's going to be really hard to unwind it.
So was this a turnkey property? Did you have to make any rehabs on it?
Yeah. So that's another, I guess, to answer, I know I didn't answer your first question. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
So
I'm
yeah,
good.
the criteria, right? So yes, don't lose money. Turnkey, definitely turnkey. And also in a certain price point where I know it would be easy to have multiple exit strategies, right?
What does that mean?
So exit strategy is like how you can make money on the property. So either you can sell it out again, you can rent it out, or you can do a mixture of both, right? Rent to own or things like that. So I wanted to make sure that I had multiple like options just in case something were to go wrong. Like say, for example, I didn't actually get the rent, even though I did all this research. In actuality, like maybe I was for some reason like way off on the rent. I'm like, oh snap! Like I don't want to don't want to lose money. So I know I can at least make some money back on the sale.
Got it. Okay. And so when you purchased this deal, was it under market or because Denver is a very competitive market and very expensive too. So how were you able to negotiate getting the price point that you want, or even did you even negotiate, or Maria
Yeah.
negotiate for you?
It was really funny actually. That first deal, I was really eager to get it done. I was on it. I was like now that I'm a realtor now, I could tell I'm like I was the best customer possible. Like I was bringing all the research, I was doing all this, that, the other, right? Like I had everything ready for my agent every single time he met. So I'm like, oh man, I wish I had a client like that. But that said, yes, it was actually like a really cool, I guess. I can't think of a better word. It's like
Okay.
a really like just serendipitous situation where basically the house, right? It was actually under contract when I first saw it, right?
Okay.
And so I didn't even think of it, even though I was targeting a certain area. I was targeting a certain like type of single family. I was targeting like that type of house, and then recently I saw it go back on market. And when we went to go, so I called up Maria. I'm like, hey, like, I want to see this house right away. It literally just came back on market because they took it down.
Yeah.
It was under contract and fell out of contract. So I want to go see it. And she's like, cool. Turns out, apparently, that house only hit the market like 2 weeks ago, like 2 weeks before we saw it go back on the market, right? And the reason why is because they had a cash buyer. They were ready to put down the whole entire price point, like the price, just like that. But then it went under inspection. And I guess the inspector they hired did not understand like the local nuances of this area, right? So anyone who's done business in this area knows that the soil is fairly soft. So when soft soil, it tends to create issues in foundations. However, in this particular area, right, as long as the foundation, like there's no evidence that's moved, within the last 10 years, it's pretty much solid. Like it's not going to move anymore, right? It's all settled. But I guess that inspector didn't know that. So that really scared that cash buyer away. They're like, oh my God, I'm surprised this house is even standing,
Like they see like cracks in the foundation.
it was actually like bulging like this, like bulging in. Yeah. So they saw the bulging in it on the walls. And they're like, oh my God, like it's crazy. And then what ended up happening, the sellers did the right thing. They took it off the market. They actually hired a structural engineer to like reassess everything. And like I said, the structural engineer has the local knowledge, and then it said, hey, really, kind of what I just said, like that's the knowledge I got from them. It's like it'll be fine, as long as there's no evidence that's moved since then. And they certified it and everything. So we had like a 5-year cert on that. So yeah, I'm like, it's good. I was like, great. So they came up with it. So when it came back on market, we went to go see it. I put the offer in that day, because I was really eager to just get it done.
Did you put in the offer at market price? Did you try to negotiate the lower price?
So it was COVID. So yeah, 2020. So everything was super fast, super hot. So we came in right at asking. So which was unheard of if you think about it, right? COVID era plus Denver. So we came in right at asking, and they accepted it, pretty much the next day.
So why single family? Usually you could hear it on the BiggerPockets, right? It's not HGTV, but BiggerPockets of putting a FHA 3.5% on a multifamily and you house hack, and that's usually a good first step for most people.
Yes. So if you can do it, if your market allows for that, where it's very easily accessible to do those, I would do that for sure. But I was living in Denver, I was also, so just the availability of multifamily extremely low. Like it's very, very low compared to the single family homes. The second thing is really doing FHA. It is good, but I just know it depends on the user, right? It's different. That's why lenders have different products, right? I realized just mathing it out, I actually would put in less money over time if I did a conventional loan, like over my timeline to get everything done. So like it actually saved me money not doing FHA because I was still able to do a 3% down payment conventional. So it's even lower of a down payment than the FHA, so it's just all those pros. It just made me just like, hey, conventional is actually a lot easier than FHA because.
But it was still 3%?
It is actually 3%.
3%. Okay. So you're still paying the mortgage premium?
So that's a great question. A lot of people ask about that. So one thing you can do is actually at the time of sale, you can actually pay off your PMI like upfront.
Interesting.
Yeah. So even though you do less than 20%, they're like, oh, there's mortgage insurance and all that stuff. Yes, there is. But depending on what you want to do with the house. So for me, I mathed it out and I realized, hey, I could pay it off right now and my cash flow would go up by like X amount of dollars, right? So then finding that profit, I'd be able to figure out, oh, like if I were to pay it now versus, how much time would it take for it to break even? And it was like 2 years. So on average, PMI usually, especially around 3-5%, with just regular debt servicing, meaning that you don't do any advance payments on your mortgage, it would drop off around 7 years. That's just like the average, kind of around there. So I said, oh, like I could just pay off now and it'll give me 5 years length, or I could just wait for the 7-year mark. But because it'll be drop off in 2, I'm like, yeah, I'll just pay it right now. So then I have another 5 years left.
Got it.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So you pay it off now, so then you don't have to pay it off on a monthly basis, which saves significantly more on your cash flow. But is this only for conventional, or can it be done with FHA?
So to be honest, I actually had never done an FHA loan.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that makes sense. Because usually the difference between conventional and FHA is that the mortgage premium on FHA is perpetual, meaning
Mm.
that it goes even exceeding when you hit the 20% equity. However, when you do the conventional, once you hit the 20% equity of the house, meaning that the value of the house is this much, and then and you have this amount of debt, usually it's 80%, and then you have the equity, right? But then when you hit that 20% equity, which is technically the ownership that you have on a home outside of the mortgage or on the loan, the conventional kind of the mortgage premium goes away with the conventional.
Right, right. Sorry, I misunderstood your question. Yes, the reason why I don't know, when I said I didn't know if you can pay it off, like when you
Mm.
first with FHA. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
You should definitely talk to
Yeah,
a
like
lender about that. But yes, so if you have PMI, the only way to get rid of that, it kind of what you just said, is perpetuals, meaning that you have to either refinance out of it. Yeah, you have to change it to a conventional or not, which again costs money too.
yeah.
Not a lot of people know that people refinancing costs money.
Yeah.
So
Wow, it does.
they're like, oh yeah, you can always refinance it later. But like, yeah, it's probably like depending on how big your loan is, could be like 3 to 7 grand. So is it worth it to pay that plus whatever your new interest rate is?
Unless you're doing it with a new lender. And most lenders are a little bit different, right? Different products, different compliance, different regulations, but
Right.
I'm pretty sure they have to follow certain rules. But I've heard, or maybe this is just more of a sale pitch, that if you use the same lender to refi, like you bought with a certain lender, then you refi with that same lender, then they would call this like a streamlined process of not paying a lender fee, for example, just because you're already using them and then you're using them again, and they make money when they sell the note anyway.
Well, yeah. Nowadays, these the direct lenders are actually just selling off the loan. Yeah, to like big companies. So I mean, lenders are individual. I have no idea.
Right.
But just from my experience, it's like that's what people typically do. You have to pay, a certain amount. But I'm sure that is also an option. Like if you're a returning customer, I'm sure that you have some kind of
Yeah.
incentive.
Yeah, makes sense. What I'm hearing in your first deal, right? Because we dove deep into a lot of it, is that you have that sense of accountability up front with Maria. And I'm pretty sure you're doing it the same with a bunch of your clients now who are just starting to get into that investor role within the real estate space. Is you meet someone who have that accountability as opposed to that initial 2 or 3 years of just watching podcasts at 2x speed. You have no accountability in that part. You might hear people talking about it, you get a burst of inspiration, but that inspiration is not good enough for you to actually make the move. And you know what they say in the gym, right? The heaviest weight is the front door.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
So once you met this realtor, it kind of kicked you off into like, okay, I found out my criteria, I'm learning stuff, and I'm implementing on those things that I'm learning, and now you're executing on like the sale process, and you got that first house.
Mhm.
The second house was also in Denver, since you used the same realtor.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. Also in Denver. It's funny. I wanted actually to talk about that. A really good analogy that came to me. And I think it's for just for most people who get started. It does feel like you are flying a plane, right? While like serving the customers on the plane as well, on top of fixing the plane at the same time. So you're learning, you're implementing, you're making mistakes, you have to learn again, you gotta make more mistakes, and then other people come in with their own knowledge, you have to learn from them, but it's all this happening at the same time, executing, learning, and making mistakes, so it feels like that's why I said, investing is not for everyone, it is very tough. And if anyone who says it's easy is lying to you. It's definitely not easy. And especially when they say, oh, it's passive income, right?
Yeah, nothing about it is passive at all.
I work harder at this job than my actual job.
Yeah, I feel you. The only passive income is when you invest in like REITs or maybe a syndication where you just do mostly of the upfront work, and then hopefully the investments goes well, then you make money. That's passive. But when you're in the grind, just absolutely looking for deals or investing, and maybe like we'll dive into property management in a little bit. Like those type of stuff, there's nothing passive about it. everything you got to do it.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever like lived by yourself, like just your own apartment, right? It's like if you don't do it, it doesn't get done.
Oh yeah,
That
100%.
is like my mentality when I was living. Like I lived by myself for a long time, just when I was living in Denver and whatnot. So I was just like, oh, if I don't do the dishes, they don't get done. Same thing with business. If like, especially when you get started, like if that roof leak doesn't get fixed and you're not calling, like you got to call the contractor. You
Oh
got to
yeah.
vet the
Yep.
contractors. Like if you don't do it, it doesn't get done,
Yeah, makes
especially in the
sense.
beginning.
Okay, so fast forward now, right? To tell us the transition that you've made, not working at a W-2 job. Now you're a full-time realtor, property manager, and just investor in general, just multiple different buckets and different hats within the real estate. How has that transit? Oh, or let's kick it back a little bit more further. What made you not proceed with the W-2 and go jump in as the entrepreneur?
Yeah, yeah. So while I was still living in Denver, after those two houses, so I was already doing it. I was managing my own properties. I was house hacking. Like renting out the places and whatnot. And then I was like, "This is great. Let's do it again." So I got another place, did it again, and it was very, it was just working. I'm like, "Oh my God!" Like I can't believe it. I was coming to the point where it was actually starting to make a lot of sense, in terms of, the money and like the time, the stress, whatnot. And so then like right after COVID, so probably like 2021, 22, I think you know about this, there's tons of layoffs were going on.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I survived like 4 rounds of layoffs, but that fifth
Wow.
round, I actually did get laid off.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't your choice to jump off. It was the company's.
Yes, yes. So, which is fair, but to be honest, I remember like the other people because I knew all the people that got laid off like in that same round as me. This guy, like, it was crazy. He's been with the company for like 15 years,
Yeah.
and like he had a lot of like family issues in terms of like medical problems and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh my God. And then what did you call it? It was a whole thing. I'm like, yo, if he didn't survive the layoff. There's no way I would survive the layoff. I feel bad, honestly. I feel like, yo, dude, you take my job. Take my job. You deserve it way more than I do. So that's why I was like, oh my God. Like, so that said, though, like that was around 2020, like 4-ish.
Oh, okay.
That's when
Wow,
I
that's pretty
first.
recent.
Yeah, yeah. But like I was already doing the property management for myself and for like a couple friends. Like like during that time when I was in Denver, I really got into the real estate like investing scene there. I was actually going to it because I think BiggerPockets is actually
Yeah,
they're
they're based out of Denver.
yeah.
Yep,
So
yep,
there
yep.
was a lot of BiggerPockets like meetups and stuff like that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I would go to those and meet a lot of people, which I did, and then they had their own properties and they're like, "Oh man, I'm tired of this, Wes. Like, how do you do this?" And I'm like, "All right, yeah, I'll help you out, give you advice and stuff like that. And if you wanted me to run, some stuff, I can help you out there, kind of thing." But just like consulting kind of stuff. And I was like, I'm actually kind of good at this. Like, because a lot of things I learned is from the internet, but most importantly from personal experience.
Right,
Yeah,
100%.
like how do you screen tenants? How do you deal with it's not like how do you deal with people, right? Like how do
Right.
you deal with people? And in my W-2 job, as you go up like the ranks in engineering, you do less and less engineering, like actual like
You
science.
start doing more like people, business development type stuff, sales.
Yeah, so I got to the point I was like a project manager, so most of my days were just talking to people, like, "Hey, like, did you get this done? No, okay, great. Like, how can we make a plan to get this done? What's the biggest hurdles? Like all that stuff." So I felt like an HR manager at that point. So that's why I felt like property management felt very easy to me because it's pretty much the same thing. Like, oh, like you want to paint your room green? Hey, I love that for you. Let me just check with the upper management real quick, kind of thing. It's like the same stuff. So I think it just came really easy to me in that sense.
So it translates whatever you do. I mean, technically, there are, if you think about it, any aspect of just within the real estate industry is a project manager,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
You're a realtor, so you're dealing with inspections, you're dealing with clients, you're dealing with the contractor if you're listing and there's some issues with the house maintenance wise. You're dealing with the lender. You're project managing this deal to come together to a closing table. And same thing with property management, right? There's properties that you're literally project managing. and as an investor too, right? Whether you're doing a fix and flip or burr, you're technically a executive project manager. So it really translates to all aspects within the real estate industry, and that's that's the joy of it. That's why it translates.
Yeah.
And did you not try to get another job after that initial laid off?
That's a great question, actually. I did.
Okay.
Because like right now, what you call it? I remember after I got laid off. So like what in my head of what was going on, I was like, man, like being an engineer was like so tied to my identity. Like I didn't really know what else I was outside of that, right? And so it did take me a couple of months to really just kind of figure things out. I was fortunate enough to be financially stable at the time. I had money put away and all that stuff literally for like
This
these
situation.
exactly. So definitely have a rainy day fund. So and so I was just trying to figure it out what I wanted to do, right? And I think, like, hey, I've already been doing this property management stuff for like almost 5 years now,
Mm.
So I'm like, why don't we just do that, So I moved back here to Philly, 2023. So after I got laid off, I tried getting into the scene here in Philly, and one of my now really good friends, my business partner Steve, he was like, you should go back. He actually encouraged me to go back to my W-2 job and try it out because he's like, you'll realize, kind of what he gave me the same speech that I was giving myself when I first started. It's like, there's no shortage of work here, but it's very hard, becoming self-employed. So if you can make way more money on your W-2, just do that because the work will always be here. You can always come back to it later, but if you can get a W-2 job, just stick to that. I'm like, okay, sure. So I tried it out, and I remember just like doing the interview prep, getting all that stuff together, redoing my resume, cover letter, all that stuff. I'm like, man, this is awful. This is definitely not what I want to do. And I remember, so it was actually in Delaware. So I got like a fourth round interview in Delaware. Yeah, so it was crazy, dude. It was, oh my God, it was like 5 hours.
Oh, wow.
They got me in a conference room, for 5 hours. It was like five different panels of people coming in and out. I didn't eat lunch. They didn't give me any food. They didn't give me any water. They're like, oh, do you want to go to the bathroom? I'm like, I just want this to be over. Like, after like hour three, I was like, oh my God, I can't. It didn't tell me that it was going to be this long, right?
Yeah.
Literally spent all day there, basically, so then after that, I was like, man, this is definitely not it. Like, I really don't want to go back to this again.
Yeah, I feel you because when I used to work in a big corporate firm, right? And I remember reading or listening to this podcast called Action Academy, and the host, his name is Brian Lubin, and he says, look at the boss of your boss, and is that what you want to be like in the next year or so? And that was huge for me. And I was like, I'm looking at the boss of my boss. He's been here for 20 plus years. And I see, because we're in a big corporate firm, what happens when shit hit the fan, right? What they do, they clear the overhead, they start firing people, so you get, and especially if it's a public company, right? What are the bottom line if the overhead, that the first thing that they do to reduce the kind of losses is get rid of more people, right? And that's just the name of the game, especially when the bottom line is the most important thing, especially for investors. So I was seeing people who are already in that company for over 15 years and just get let go just like that. And it was just insane. And it's a free for all. You could be in a big corporate company and they tell you all the nice things, all this, pizzazz, and you get all these benefits. But at the end of the day, you're just another employee number. It's no different than like a prison, right? But
Yeah.
just a little bit more benefits and comfortability. But at the same time, I understand where you're going from, because when you're working in a full-time job, you're not making, you're capped at the salary that you make. You're giving a time to someone else and actually being under someone too, that they tell you what to do. And sometimes as entrepreneur, it feels like prison in a way, because you're like, really want to do something. I'm already doing something and I have all these time to do that, but I can't because of this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think just the way that I like my brain works. I love, hey, I want my effort to translate to actual
The benefits.
yeah, the benefits, right? It's
Yeah.
like if I put more effort in, will I make more money?
Right.
And in this case, obviously not, right? That's not how W-2 works. And also, also just another personality of mine. Like, I don't really like when people tell me what to do. Let's come to learn, like
But clients tell you what to do.
they, it's something called illusion of choice. The Riz master, Riz. So on paper, yes, they tell me what to do, but it wasn't really their choice.
I tell them their choice and they choose, and
I always give them options, like
I tell them what to do.
yeah, option one, it's amazing, it's stellar. You should definitely choose this option. Option two, just a little bit worse, but still good, but a little worse.
And there's the sales side. There's the sales side of Wes coming out. Good stuff. Okay, so you're laid off, and obviously you're doing this property management. So tell us more how that kind of kick started, right? You're laid off. Obviously, you have a lot of time now, and you're doing this property management. How many units were you managing yourself and other people at the time? And were you building systems as you go, or were you using the same systems when you were doing the two houses in Denver?
Yeah, so wow, that's a lot of questions. One say, let me break that down. So the first thing I want to say is, and just going back to that layoff, I'm like, honestly, if almost like looking back at it now, I can say that is like I've almost felt like a blessing in disguise, honestly, because I know myself, and if I was like, oh, if that didn't happen to me, I'd probably still be at that job, like right now, probably just because it was, it was very comfortable. It was a very comfortable job. I didn't really have to, my day was pretty much planned for me kind of thing. Like it was just in, out, same systems and whatnot. But going to it, so yes. So now that that's happened, I'm like, you know what, now since I got laid off, let's just do what I was doing before. So I started picking up a couple of like my friends and like referrals of friends and stuff like that. They were, pushing their business towards me. I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll, again, more consultations. Sure. Like, hey, this is what I've done. We can sit down, talk this, just like, just like this. And it's like, and I realized I'm like, oh, wow, I actually do know a lot now that I've been doing this for now almost like, it's been 4 years at that point, almost 5. And so, sorry, what was the question again? I wanted to make sure. I want to make sure I answered it.
Yeah, so you kickstarted the property management. You kind of had more time doing that. The systems that you built at that time with the first two houses, was that translating over, or did you have a whole new systems built in for, I guess, the new clients and existing clients?
So it's funny, the systems definitely had to be evolved, but I started with the ones that I had. I mean, just use what you have the most highest level, right? And I realized that.
What was those systems, just for the viewers?
Oh yeah, so at the time I used Rent Ready,
Okay.
as like my main thing. So it was really great because it collected rent, it does listings for you, it has a built-in application, things like that, and you can do lease signing right on the app. So everything was there. Also, it was a document repository for the tenants. So it's like, hey, they can always access their own lease. So it was really helpful, and so that's why I started using that. And also another system I used was good old Google Sheets for my own accounting purposes and whatnot. But those are the main things. And then as I realized here in Philly, I was like, oh, actually, we really can't be using these systems because one thing we're finding is that you have to pay for listings. That's another thing. So they can post up in Zillow, but you charge by the day. That's how they do it. So I was like, oh, charge by the day? Like, no way. I don't want to charge by the day. So I tried doing it. I ended up just going straight to Zillow and doing it for free, through that way. And then, they're going through Redfin and all that stuff. Like, just literally going to each website and posting it like that way, just because I know that, when you first get started, it does cost a lot of money, and I didn't have a ton of money to like invest into all these things. And so I wanted to just create a proof of concept that I can actually do property management, and once I prove it to myself that, hey, this is good, it's sustainable, then we can improve on that versus like right now we're still figuring things out. Like, does this even work?
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay. So you had Rent Ready, and then you had Google Sheets. Now what do you have currently that is because most of the private management are basically in the same thing that you just mentioned. But what do you have now, and how is that different than Rent Ready?
Yeah, so right now we use Turbo Tenant for now because and we're like in the process of moving to Appfolio, but it's just personally it's just too much time. It's also
Just
transferring a lot of
data, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so that's why I say we're in a process because now we're looking to hire people to do that because I was like I can't sit down and move, you know, hundreds of units over,
Sure.
and whatnot. And also then you also have to reach out to every single one of those tenants and be like, hey, you had to download this app or like, this is the new login. You have to create it's a whole thing. So,
Right.
especially when you move between systems, it's a big deal.
Right.
So like you want to make sure that people are connected to it, people are willing to change. That's another thing. And if they don't, then you have to be like relentless with the follow-ups to
Mm,
make sure they actually get it done.
okay.
So, and then for that, that's really it. We tried other softwares for like finances and stuff like that. That's why we're looking for Appfolio because it does have that built in.
Nice.
But right now we're still on Google Sheets and whatnot because we haven't needed to do that, and we've been trying different like
Platform.
softwares. Yeah, but platforms just hasn't been right. And what I've noticed a lot with a lot of property management platforms, there's no one size fit all. Like
Yeah.
if it was up to me, I'd wish I like hired a coder or like someone who makes
Create your own
and
stuff.
create my own because there's no because even like some of these property managers I've been talking to, they're like, oh yeah, we use that Foley for this, but then we use like another thing for
Yeah.
communication. We use another thing for this. I'm like, oh man,
There's too many apps, and then when you hire a new person, you got to teach them all the process, and it's just
yeah.
it's just more hassle.
Exactly. So it's just like, we'll just keep running with what we have now and we just make sure that this works here. And then once we transfer over, we'll have to create a whole new SOP and all that stuff.
Yeah, makes sense. I remember we had a conversation, right? And within a real estate kind of deal. I mean, developments is not really just for ground up, but it's just a process. You're developing a real estate project into stabilization, and then you sell it. It's like same thing with buying a business, venture capitalists, seed of venture, things like that. But within a real estate development, you have the acquisition, you have the financing, then you have the project management, then you have the property management, right? And obviously, you could go into deeper than that. But I remember we had a conversation about the pillars of property management. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, yeah. So I like to break it down into I think I said four pillars, right? The first one is leasing. Obviously you're a leasing office, so it takes it from listing the property all the way to actually creating the lease for tenants. The second one, oh, by the way, also I do a lot of long-term rentals. I know other property managers have short-term, mid-term rentals. We primarily only focus on long-term. So that's why I say tenants because that's all we deal with.
Sure.
It's a whole like short-term is a whole different game. It's a lot of work. That's really what it is. It's a lot of work. So we do some short-term rentals, but we're very selective about it just because I know how much it takes.
Got it. So the first one is leasing,
Yeah,
then
leasing. And then the next one is tenant maintenance relationships. So people who talk to just the tenant and the maintenance coordinator. So because they're the ones that I guess the face to the tenant. You really say like, oh, like, hey, Aldo is always the one that's like texting me, right? And like we'll send, I don't know, Joe, right? So now they think it's just Aldo and Joe in the office, even though it could be multiple people
sure.
in there, like as Aldo.
Yeah, yeah,
But like you're the face to the tenant, right? So you want to develop that relationship. So that's the second department. Third one, obviously, is financing. And that's finance department, accounting. I guess there's technically, I realized that the client onboarding too, client relationship is also part of the tenant and maintenance one.
Okay.
Like it's just the people who talk with the people, kind of like the project manager.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right. So I would say client, tenant, maintenance. One person. That's one department, right? Because the last one is legal. So that's why I was like making sure because laws change all the time. You have to make sure you're up to date, that your leases are, legally allowed. So just because it's in your lease but not legal, you cannot enforce it, kind of thing. So, making sure that's always up to date. and whatnot, especially, which also includes like evictions and things like that, making sure that you're, what's the word? You're compliant with the fair housing laws, and also some of these programs here in Philly, they require certain, documents and whatnot. So making sure that that's accurate.
Got it. So the first one is leasing. The second one is tenants, I guess maintenance and tenants, right? And
Clients,
the clients. And then,
relationships. Yeah.
right. And then the third one is finance. And then the fourth one is legal. And were you doing all of this when you first started?
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. There was no way. There's no one else out here. But yeah, I was definitely doing all of it.
So what about now? Where do you focus more now? Where did you start delegating?
Yeah, so now, we've hired a couple of people for the leasing office. So to be honest, like 80% of the job is pretty much in the leasing office. That's for the most part because that's you're dealing with applicants, you're dealing with leads, you're dealing with leases. Like that's usually the majority of the work that you have to do in property management. Yes, there are some maintenance issues here and there, but it's not as often as, an applicant coming in through the
Right.
door, right? So that's when I was kind of building this up, after I figured out that proof of concept I was talking about earlier. I'm like, hey, this actually works. Like I can actually make money off of this, right? The first thing I wanted to do was take 80% of my work off my plate, right?
So that was the leasing.
Leasing, exactly. So I'm like, focus just on the leasing, focus on, finding someone who can essentially replace me in that aspect. And we definitely have, and actually we're going to be hiring our third person to do that. So now we have redundancy to make sure, like, hey, if one person gets sick, the leasing office doesn't close down.
Right.
Yeah. So that was the first part. And now what I'm focusing more on is actually the financing, the finance part of it, because it's, we have to make sure the numbers are right,
Right.
and that's really where I'm at right now, just like that. And we have lawyers for legal now. So finally,
Oh, yeah.
finally. But just finding the right lawyers that have the good relationships, that's the most important thing.
What about the maintenance aspect? Are you still doing that yourself or?
No, no. We have handyman. We have all types of contractors up and down.
But who handles like the client, like between calling the tenants and then calling the contractor?
Oh yeah. So actually, we have other people for that now.
Okay.
Yeah. But first it was me, definitely. But now it's slowly transitioning. That's kind of where we are currently, just like teaching this part to someone else, because I had been doing that, I think, up until like honestly last month. And then that's why I'm like, we had to develop an SOP for that. So I think you'll see a lot of my processes are definitely in time, like alive. Like, oh, we do something, oh, it's wrong. Okay, now we gotta fix it. Yeah, fix it and then do it again. So like last month, I'm like, oh man, I should probably make an SOP for this. So we started making one, and then now we have one. Now we're gonna hire someone for that, and then we're just currently literally training them on that. Right.
Now, when you're hiring someone, are these all virtual or are these all people who are in office?
Yeah, so for the leasing office and for the relationship manager, I guess we'll call it, these are all virtual. So that's the main thing, and it's been great. It's been working out phenomenally. I really like working with everyone in the office.
So how do you have showings for prospect tenants if they're all virtual on the leasing aspect?
Yes, so we actually have different options as well. We use something called Show Me.
Okay.
Yeah, so we use Show Me for that. For people who don't know, it's pretty much like a agent for hire. Essentially, you put out like a request, and then agents will come. They can take the request, and then they will show the house for you.
Do you have to be an agent for that, or is it okay?
Yes, yes. Any kind of like a real estate transaction must require a license. So you have to have a license to even be on that platform.
Well, as a client, not as the agent to do the showings, but as the, I guess, investor or the property manager who doesn't have that kind of realtor or salesperson license. Can they do that as well? To do the showing me?
To put the request.
Yeah, put in a request. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, yeah. We have a company account, so they can.
Oh, yeah.
They can just do it on there. Yeah.
Got it. What if you're just a regular Joe Schmo who's doesn't want to go to them? Let's say like you have a property in somewhere significantly far, like maybe 2 hours.
Yeah.
You don't want to do a 2 hour drive just to show someone for like 15 minutes, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, you have to have a license
Okay,
to be on that platform.
got it.
On both sides.
Do you have recommendations for other ways that people can show their units?
Yeah, drive there. There's one, and then the other thing, and I don't recommend this. I again, like just the way I learn things, I try things out, and one thing I did, I remember for my house in Colorado,
Yeah.
I remember I had my handyman like set up all these like cameras and stuff. We had Wi-Fi going and whatnot, and we would actually do like a virtual showing. And
Yeah, that's risky.
yeah, it's very risky. I learned that. I learned that not the hard way, but I realized I'm like, okay, I can't tell if they've left. Did they lock the door? Did they close the door all the way to make sure it's locked? It gave me a lot of, I guess it gave me a lot of like headaches. So I'm like, oh, I should probably stop doing this. But
Yeah.
I know some people have tried doing that. I mean, you can, but at the end of the day, just work with a proper manager or an agent that you trust.
Got it.
That's probably the best.
Is that what you do now in your Colorado properties? That you have agents that shows the okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's a Marino.
But they get paid when a prospect tenants come in and
Yeah.
okay.
Of course. I mean, I understand that, she's great, but she doesn't work for free. I know that.
Yeah.
Just like anything else, there's commission, of course.
Got it. Do you have any other advice for people who are doing out of state investing? Because that's something people are scared of. For example, like the showings, right?
Exactly. I think I would not. I know it might be hard for some people, but personally, if you're getting started, do not do out of state investing. It's just way too hard because you don't have a team. And yes, you can call people. And I've seen people, BiggerPockets are like, oh, the long distance investing, all that stuff. Sure, I understand, but at the end of the day, especially if you don't know what to ask, you don't know what you're looking for. Even now today, like I will go, like if I try to interview a contractor, I'll ask them, where's your site? Where's your like, nearest site? So I will actually drive there and look at it to see what kind of like work they've done, because this is the type of work that you're doing for someone else. Like that's the same work they're going to be doing for me.
Yeah.
So that's why like it's like the things like that. Like yes, you can have people go out, but at the end of the day, it's a lot easier when it's close by.
Yeah, 100%. Because there's some, what is it called? Some limitations, right? To you going so far out that sometimes it's a brand new market, and obviously this, when you jump into a brand new market, you don't know anyone,
Right?
Especially at a young age, you could get screwed over with a certain contractor or a certain agent. They just push you. Yeah, it's a great neighborhood, right? Because the stuff that sometimes you see on Google Maps are like very old, like 2-3 years, maybe sometimes more if they don't drive that very often. So if you're trying to do, what is that, like driving for dollars, and you're like, oh, this is like a nice neighborhood, but it's slowly like reverse gentrifying and see like a worse neighborhood. Like
Little sliders like 2019. Do I want you could see it on Google Street?
I was like, oh, that's a good price, but then sometimes you don't know. And then, for example, in Philly, right, there's certain neighborhoods that you won't want to invest in, but sometimes it goes block by block. Yeah, this might be a bad neighborhood, but this block is really nice for whatever reason. But you don't know that unless you're in the market and having conversation with someone.
Right.
So it's yeah, I would agree in the same thing. I don't know how people do long distance distance long distance investing, but yeah, you got to have boots on the ground and trusted people. Maybe you have a family member and you have a full trust in them, and maybe they have a little bit of equity. Maybe that worked out, but at the same time, if you're just on your own and you're trying to figure stuff out, yeah, it's really, really difficult.
Yeah, and for me too, like I already had the team set up before I moved out. I was like, hey, like if anything were happening, I do have those people that I can call, and
That's good.
already established. That's why it was okay for me to, if I felt okay to just to leave and like relax, have them take care of it. But yeah, those relationships were cultivated over years. Like I had to make sure that they, said what they did. I looked at their work and all that stuff. So anything I would do, and if I were to do long distance now, like long distance investing, I would like actually go live there for at least like 4 months to just like do what I do,
Understand the market.
understand the market, talk to who, the actual contractors that get hired, things like that, like who's who essentially, right? And then live there for a little bit, see what's like to live there, what kind of demographic you're dealing with, all those things that before. So that's all I'm like, unfortunately, I can't just pick up and go, 4 months and not do anything, but that's what I would do personally, just because to make sure that I had a really good team there, because once I'm gone, now it's 100% on the people that you found.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so let's go into the property management business,
Mm.
right? You're in a business where from the investor standpoint, it's difficult, right? Because you are taking a percentage of or the revenue, because that's your property management fee. I'm pretty sure most property managers charge based on the gross revenue, while at the same time you're also making money on maybe additional maintenance, right? If there's a maintenance, there's maybe an upcharge on whatever the contractor is charging. So it's a two-way street, right? It's very difficult as the investor, because there's a certain percentage taken out of the profit, and then there's additional expense for the maintenance that you're managing.
Sure.
What do you see in, I guess, being a property manager yourself and an investor, right? What pitfalls do you see like that investor and property management relationship? Because you could see on BiggerPockets, and they say that, property managers are the worst, right? You can't find the right one. It's difficult. Like, they all just all want what your profit. So where do you see that balance, and how do you make sure that the I guess the values are aligned in those relationships?
Yeah, it's funny actually. When I first started, like once I was living here for a little bit, I wasn't going back and forth as much anymore. I actually hired a property manager for my Colorado properties, even though I already had a team. I actually hired them because I wanted to. I don't know, like I just felt so scared, I guess, because I was like, oh, I'm not sure if things would happen and like something else. I just wasn't there, so I was like,
You want
"You
that safety.
yeah, safety. I couldn't think of the word. It's that safety of like having someone there, boots on the ground, kind of what you said, right? And when you hire property management, it comes with that, right? It comes with boots on the ground. It comes with, now you don't have to pay per showing, right? They actually have people there to show the place for you. They have staff, whatnot. And typically they also have like in-house maintenance and things like that. People have already been vetted. So when you say, oh, they take your profits, yes, but that's also, I understand that's what you're paying for, right? So
At your feet.
yes, right. So it's 10%, right, of gross revenue that comes in every month, right? But what are you paying for exactly is the experience, right? And the ease of mind. That's really what it is, because say if I was managing your place, right? I don't know if you know a good plumber, for like just a little job here or a huge job like your house is being flooded.
Right.
I know both. Right. So that's really like, hey, if something's there, I can actually call someone right now.
Mm.
I know exactly who to call. Right. And they'll come fix the place for you. Right. Versus maybe you don't know someone who, like an emergency maintenance person. Right. And what are you going to do? You're going to have to do exactly what we always do: interview people. We have to go vet them, make sure they're good, all that stuff. But that's what that fee is for, is to, I've
The
already done
convenience.
exactly. I've
Yeah.
done that for you already.
Yeah.
So that's usually what ends up happening. And, I think what you're like alluding to before, right? It's like, well, how do you find that balance? I think it's because, especially if you're new, you have less than 5 units, do it yourself.
Mm.
The reason why is because especially if you live in the area, and, and if you live at the building, the even easiest part. Yeah, like do it yourself, because you should really just try it out,
Mm.
because I think a lot of people who have those frustrations with property management, either they haven't done it before, so they have no idea what it takes.
It's like the standards that.
Exactly. They had no standard on, like, because just like any other contractor, how do you interview people? Or you have to know what they're supposed to be doing, right?
Mm.
So if you even buy a house, let's say it's your first property, and you've never actually property managed ever, right? You have no idea what it takes
Right.
to manage that property, right? You don't have any of the cultivated relationships with the contractors. You don't have any experience how to vet people in general,
Mm.
right? So that's why I'm like, hey, do it yourself, try it out, and then once you realize like, hey, this is a lot, which it is, like even myself, like I remember when I first started, I was like, oh man, this is, if, because one like wrong decision, I'm not saying it's like detrimental.
The
Like, oh my
work.
gosh,
Yeah, yeah.
but it can be absolutely. So that's why I tell people,
This the make mistakes part.
yes, make mistakes because you realize. I think a lot of people they'll come back. Like when people say, hey, can you take care of my place, wherever now. I'm like, I ask them like, this is your first place. I'm like, you should first tell me how much you hate it. And then what you had the biggest struggles with, and then I was like, okay, no, guess what? I can help you with X, Y, and Z. That's why you're paying me, is because I have the experience to fix your.
Well, and also the convenience that it will provide for you because you went through all those hardships. You have built the confidence because you have your own proof of concept, and you provide that solution to other people, and that's where your fee comes in.
Yes, absolutely. And that's as at the end of the day, it is a business. Like if you think about it this way too, a lot of people are very focused on, like, because nowadays I think the fee's like about 10%. Between 8, 12, depending on for any long term rental, right? People are very focused on that. Like, oh my god, 10%, that's a whole lot, right? At the end of the day, you still making 90% of what you would have made anyways for 0% of the hassles.
Mm.
Personally, because I am if I already I'm in the business, I'm like, that's a pretty sweet deal. Honestly, I should be charging half. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, so that's why it's like people like they feel that loss, like, oh man, like why are you charging so much for this? At the end of the day, it's probably because they don't have a standard for it.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so you said that in under 5 units, people should manage their own properties. So is it after 5 units where it makes sense to hire out the property manager, or do you? Because I've seen both, right? I've seen people who have 20 units and they self-manage. I've seen people who are like, I hate property management, I hate leasing, I hate showing people, and after like maybe 3 or 4, you just like start hiring out property managers.
Yeah. I just said five. It's not a solid like number or not, but it's like enough where you actually have to deal with a lot of people, right? If you have 5 units, that's 5 tenants, right? And then now it's like, say you had 3 vacancies. Now you have to go show all those vacancies all the time, right?
Mm.
I feel like once I got to that point, I was like, oh yeah, this is a lot of work. That's why I say about 5 units, but it's just enough to where you feel like I can't do it anymore. You have enough experience to really figure out, are you cut out to do this or not?
Got it. Makes sense. Okay. And in terms of like, let's go a little bit into the leasing aspect. When you prospect a tenant, that's like the similar to like the interview process that you mentioned when you were doing the W-2, right?
Yes.
And it's almost as similar as just the roles have switched. It's not that you are the interviewee, you're an interviewer. When you talk to tenants, what are some questions that you ask? Obviously, once you get the applications, you look at the credit report and I guess the evictions and the reports that are taken out when they did the check, right? What happens after? You look at that, okay, what happens after? What are the questions that you ask?
That's actually really, before I answer your question, right? The interview starts the moment they message us.
Interesting.
Yes. I'm giving out the secrets. No, but the interview starts the moment they message us, because we need to see that, like, at the end of the day, and for, I guess, for newer investors that who are doing the property management, the mindset is they have to prove to you that they are worth your asset, right? That's really what the mindset has to be, because I understand, like, people like, oh no, like, I want to be the best, I want to be really friendly, I want to do this. You can be, but at the end of the day, once you give those keys over to the tenants, right, you lose a lot of your leverage to get things done, right? The only thing, like, for most people, is eviction, right? But if there's something were to go wrong, so you have to come with the mindset that they need to prove to you that because you have something valuable, right?
Right.
It's a lot of your money, I'm pretty sure, especially when you first started. Yeah, it's a lot of your money. It's a lot of time, a lot of effort that you put into it. So it really, at the end of the day, you have the valuable things, and they need to prove to you that they're worth it. So that's the mindset that you have to come in with. And sometimes it might feel like very cold and very, like, what's the word, like, tough. But at the end of the day, especially when it's not my property, I'm managing someone else's. Oh, you best believe I'm doing that, because now it's my name too, it's my reputation on the line as well. So that said,
So what does that mean when the interview process start when they talk? Because mostly you get people, it's like, I would like a live tour. So what do you mean by?
Yeah. So in a lot of our listings, we have certain like instructions in them, right? Like, oh, please message us with your full name, email address, and the place you're interested, like the property you're interested in. I mean, if they don't put those three pieces of information,
And they're
in
very
there,
simple.
yeah, it's very simple. Like it means that you've read the instructions, like you've read, like, because the only way you can message us, right? If you've seen any Zillow like posting, right? The our phone number is at the very bottom of the listing, meaning that you should have read everything else in between.
But they also see your phone number in I guess, the person that's listing it, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
but that the location of that phone number is at the bottom of the listing.
Mm.
You know, if you, I mean, I don't know if you can pull up Zillow right now, but like it's after the description. So you see the pictures, you see the price, you see the address, and then underneath that, that's all the amenities and everything, and then it's the description,
Mm.
and then it's my name, and then my phone number,
Got it.
right? So meaning that if you called me or you texted me, you best believe I believe you read the rest of this description, you know, and it's okay. I know probably most people don't, and most people don't. So that's why, like, that's why I said the interview started, because if you in that description says please email us with this information, right, or just text us with this information. If you can't even follow that, it's okay. No worries, brother.
Got
No, we not the right fit for you. So like things like that. It's like a lot of our processes have these like small tests. Like again, like my mentality is I have the valuable thing. You must prove to me that it's value. To allow for me to allow you in, essentially, right? If I give you very simple instructions of please text me your full name, and you don't do that, like I mean, and what happens if there's down the line, right? It's like, hey, you owe like $700. You're like $700 short on your rent. How's that gonna be? Versus, I mean, it's something so small like give me your name versus like, hell, now you owe us money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, so I feel like it paints a picture for the future.
Okay, so what happens after, right? You have the preliminary, you have the description, and they follow the direction. They send you the three items. At that moment, do you just, hey, you want to schedule a tour? Do you want to do applications first entering the tour?
Yep.
Like, what's that process like for you?
Yeah, so we host open houses. You know, we have agents come out and do whatnot, and they schedule themselves for the tour, actually. So that's another, I guess, like a little test. You know, can you click on this link and type in your name, your phone number, email address, and
Is there like a Calendly link?
yeah, it's Calendly.
Oh, okay.
Calendly, yeah, we use Calendly for that. So, and then another little test, right, is that in Calendly, it's already built in. They have that reconfirmation button. You know what I'm talking about? The reconfirmation button. You know what I'm talking about?
So what? Like after you put in all the information, you confirm, and then there's a next page that you say confirm?
Yes. So it's a reconfirmation, and what happens is, like, say the tour's on Saturday, right?
Oh, like a reminder.
Yeah, it's
Like
the
the day before.
right?
Okay.
It's a reminder, right? But then there's another thing. So a couple, and it's on every single one of our emails. It's like you must reconfirm at least 1 hour before the start time, which is, and it'll say every single time, it's like the reconfirmation link is 2 hours before the start time. Because the reason why is because we're paying for agents to go out there. If no one reconfirms, I can't tell if anyone's going. Just canceling, because we're not paying for someone to go out for a empty open house. You know, like that doesn't make any sense. So we need to make sure at least, that people reconfirm to actually show up to that open house.
Got it. So you have a dedicated time for people to come to these open houses. You're not doing like, okay, one tenant is at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday, and another is like, oh, I can only do it on like Saturday.
No,
Okay.
brother, there's no way. Like I can't imagine that happening. Like unless they had their own agents, which is fine, but most people don't.
Mm.
So that's why I was like, if you had to do an individual showing for every single person,
Yeah, you're not gonna have a lot of time. I mean, that's just
that's what
especially if it's like been Bumble.
yeah,
It's
that's a full-time job in itself. That's why like there's no way. So that's why we do open houses, so everyone can just go on that one.
So in that open house, is it just Saturdays? Is it like weekends only? Is it like weekdays? Oh,
Yeah, we purposely put it on the weekends,
okay.
because most people work during the weekdays. So yeah, we do it all throughout the weekend.
Similar to what you see like a for sale open house, like in the afternoon time.
Exactly. We want to make it as accessible as possible.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, but like just going back to that, the little reconfirmation, right? So it's like there's a link that comes out. Say the open house 11 on Saturday, right? The Calendly will automatically send out the link to reconfirm at 9 a.m., 2 hours before. So then, it's to ensure that people actually are
Gotta show up.
available,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Because like you can remind them a day before, maybe they forgot, oh, actually, like I got, oh, like a vet, like my dog got to go to the vet, at 11, right? And they forget about that. So to put it into their head again to remind them, hey, this is happening in 2 hours. Are you still available for that, right?
Mm.
They click on the link. It texts them, it emails them too. And I know we say on the very top, it says important. Please reconfirm. Like so, it's very similar to that. And on top of that, people don't realize who are we texting, who are we emailing. You put that information in. So if it's wrong, it's on you. That's on us. So that's why it's another thing. Like, again, another little test. Like, can you click on one link to reconfirm to ensure that someone will be there at the open house for you? That's another thing, right? And then we have open house throughout. We purposely make it like 15 minutes. That's
Yeah,
another thing.
because that's enough for you to just walk around and even like take pictures and whatever.
More importantly, it makes sure that people show up on time.
Mm.
We don't want the agent to be there for an hour,
And nobody show up.
and no one show up. Exactly. And even though they reconfirmed and all that stuff, like, hey, we'll send the agent out to be there, right? At the end of the day, the agent has the next stop. They have to leave, right? To go to the next place. So, we purposely make it 15 minutes, so then it gives the agent enough time to get to the next location, right?
Yeah.
So if people are showing up, 20, 30 minutes later, sorry, like, it's like we can't unless you like, did you text us ahead of time to let us know so we can tell the agent, hey, please stay till X amount of time? No, all right,
Well, does the agent give you a report at the end of I guess,
Mhm.
whatever you hire him? Like, hey, this person showed up like 5 minutes later. Hey, this person looked like she's interested, and this person's kind of like so and so, and she was giving me this feedback on this property.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we get the feedback from each, but yeah, like going back to it, it's just a little test. Do you show up on time, right?
Mm.
If you can't, did you communicate that,
Mm.
right? Like very basic. I say I don't mean that in like a derogatory way.
No, 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 no. That
It's
makes
just like
sense.
these are very like fundamental things we need to see in potential tenants. Do you communicate with us? If there's something wrong, do you trust that we will do the right thing? If once communicated, it's like, hey, oh, I'm gonna be 15 minutes late actually. All right, no worries. We'll wait till then 20 after instead of 15.
Yeah, yeah,
How's that sound?
yeah.
If that don't work, hey, you can always reschedule. Not a problem.
Got
Kind
it.
of thing.
Okay, makes sense.
So yeah, I know we do really deep
Yeah, yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
process, but just to elaborate, it's like, yeah, every single thing is a little test to prove that this person is worthy of the asset.
Mm. And as a property manager, obviously you get paid on the gross revenue. It feels like you're not urgent to hire or not hire, lease to any tenants. You want the right tenants that are paying and responsible and can follow directions.
Yeah.
And you're okay with, I guess, maybe you or an investor are holding off, maybe a month or maybe 2 months for a tenant turnover.
Yeah, so a lot of the clients that I work with, right? I'm extremely selective. I don't just take on anyone, right?
Mm.
One thing that I need to know that they understand is that I always choose quality over quantity, right? It's okay to have people apply, but I will not just put in like if you I tell people exactly this. If you just want a warm body that pays rent, I'm not the guy, right? Like I'm not just gonna do that because it just goes against all the values that I hold where it's
Right.
like, hey, this is just, a money business, right? At the end of the day, and I'll say this very proudly, out of all the years I've been doing this, I haven't had one eviction. So, and I intend to keep it that way.
Mm.
And it's because I do believe that my process is very much vetted and very much a tried and true, although yes, and I tell, owners like, it might take a little bit longer, but you know, I can guarantee way less headaches in the future.
Mm. Yeah, makes sense. Got it. Okay. So once you get the applications, then you have a questionnaires, right? You ask the questions, you ask based on the report, you ask further questions of like, hey, what's going on with this? Or just want to confirm that you work for this person. Is that something that you do as well?
So typically once we get the report together, sorry, 1 second. So yes, once we get the report together, yes, we will always vet everything. So a lot of times the applicants are very obsessed with credit score, right? That's like the biggest thing. They're like, oh, I have a 600 credit score. Is that enough? Oh, I'm just under. I'm like at 580, whatever not. At the end of the day, from the property management standpoint, credit score does not mean a ton. Actually, yes, we want people to believe that it does mean a lot, but the reason why is because there's so many ways to fix your credit score. There's a lot of people get things expunged. You can get things, deleted off your credit, and that will just bump your credit up, for just by deleting things. That is one way that a lot of people do. More importantly, right, this is the real thing. Why is your credit like that? With your credit history, it paints a story of like what happened, right? You'll see someone delinquent on like, so one thing that one of our criteria, right, is that you cannot owe money to other apartments. That seems very obvious, right? Like, we're about to do the exact same thing.
Like, why do you want to owe this and then you gotta owe us?
Exactly. And that's one. And another thing is you can't owe utility companies money. Like you just can't do that, because think about it, right? Anything to do with housing, right? You can't be owing people that,
Right.
like, owe people money. So like if they owe electric company money, I'm like, in what point do you like say, oh, actually, like this thing is that we're paying for now, we can't pay the electric, we can't pay the water.
Right.
Anything to do with the housing, right? Because it causes a lot more headaches in the future, for people. And yes, I understand that, I'm not like ignorant to know that people are in different situations financially, but at the end of the day, I am trying to
You're still running a business.
yeah, I'm not even running a business. I'm trying to protect my clients' assets.
Sure.
That's my number one priority, protecting the client's assets. Like, either it be, saying no to maybe just subpar applicants, or, maybe which is, or a flood in the house, right? Like, I don't care how much it would cost, but I want to make sure that the house is still staying, kind of thing, So yeah, always protecting the client and always making sure that, that we're covered as well.
Sure.
We don't want any problems.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. So after that, obviously the lease agreements, and then you give them the keys, and then here we go. Right?
So not necessarily. So after you get done that, right, yes, we have a leasing agreement and whatnot, but then, we have them take on other things, like making sure the utility is transferred, right? That's one. We want to make sure that that's done. We want to make sure you have tenant insurance. That's another really important thing. A lot of people, and I definitely advise, if you don't know anything about this, like, the tenant insurance really helps out both parties. People don't believe that. Like, they're like, oh, like it's only for the tenant because it's called tenant insurance. No, not necessarily. Essentially it acts like another layer of insurance on top of the insurance that you have. So assuming you have an LLC already, so you have your landlord insurance, not homeowner insurance. I mean, if you live there, it'll be homeowners, but you got your landlord insurance, right? And then on top of that, you have your umbrella, right, insurance, and then on top of that, you can actually use other people's the renter's insurance to help you out as well if there's any issues. So that's why it's very important. And I tell people, typically, we want people to pay that in full. It's only like $150 for the whole year. Typically, we want people to pay that in full because otherwise
they go like cancel mid-year.
Exactly. That's one. Or two, we want to make sure that we are also a additionally insured, or like a interested party on their insurance, because then if they cancel it, they'll email us too. Still let us know. But yeah, very, very important. I don't want to dive into all that. But definitely that should be part of your criteria.
Got it. Okay. So you mentioned in this, this is just one of the pillars, but this one pillar is 80% of the work, right? You have the tenant. Obviously, there's some stuff where it's all variable. It's not like every single week or month there's always issues at the house. Assuming that you get the right clients with the right properties that are being fixed up well and maintained pretty well and had great tenants in the past, maintenance is not really a big time consuming thing. Hopefully it's not, right? For every landlord, that's the best thing ever. You have good tenants that are taking care of your property and who are paying rent on time, and you're just cash flowing at that point, hopefully, if you buy it right. Yeah. But now, what is the majority of your time consist of? you have the systems and processes on the property management side. You have, I guess, the virtual, I guess, the VAs that are running. You have the SOPs. You have your own personal experience. You've done it all. What is your steps now? What are your next steps, and what does your time include? Like, what's your time consist of now?
What am I doing now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a long-winded question.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. So right now, it's just perfecting our SOPs. Every day, I work with all the VAs to make sure, like, hey, you're in the middle of the process. Like, if you see some edge case that I didn't even think of, like, let's put that in there, right? Like, how do we improve training? So it's gotten to the point where pretty much I'm back where I was corporate, like dealing with people and, in terms of dealing, like how to train them, how to motivate people, sure, to, I guess take more of like a leadership role in terms of now, like I'm no longer, I feel like I no longer work in the business. I'm working on the business. Yeah. So I feel very happy that I've gotten to that point, but it's very hard to let go of brain sometimes. I'm like, oh, let me just jump in here. And I'm like, no, no, no. We have to, like, if I start doing that again, like things unwind. No, I can't, like, but it's very hard. I'm sure you feel it too, with your, self-employment stuff. Like, it's very hard to, like, not jump back in and, like, do everything. You have to, like, trust that the processes, the people you put in place will get it done eventually.
Yeah, it's tough when you delegate some stuff to other people because they don't care as much as you do. But then when you want to do it yourself, you're like, oh crap, now I'm in the weeds again and
Yeah.
working on this. I know it's gonna be right, but at the same time, should I be doing this with my time currently at this stage of my career or my business?
Exactly. And that's why, I've started to, I'm still doing the podcast thing, even to this day, listen to podcasts, listen to, like, reading books, and now it's more geared towards, leadership,
Teaching.
and yeah, exactly, coaching and stuff like that. And one thing I wanted to get into, I just got it. It's called 11 Rings. I don't know if you heard that. Have you heard of that book? Phil Jackson, the
Oh yeah, the coach
coach,
for
yeah.
Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan.
Yes, yeah.
You said Phil Jackson, that threw me off a little bit.
Yeah, so yeah, he wrote a book about coaching, and I'm excited to dive into it. It's about leadership. How he was able to coach, two of the greatest, like, players. Oh, technically three, because Shaq was on the Lakers too during Kobe's time.
So yeah, well they had a little.
But I would say he's probably up there, top 10, or not. But yeah, so I'm excited to learn about that, and I think it's really important to, now that I'm shifting gears towards this, like, leadership role in terms of, like, training and whatnot, that I'm doing it right. And I feel like I'm not, like, learning the different strategies, different tactics, but more so, like, working on my own mindset. Like, how do I convey this information that I know to someone else, like, in an effective way?
Yeah, yeah. You're trying to explain stuff in layman's term and not just because of my personal experience. Because I did this and did that, and someone was like, "Oh crap!" Like it's like the same thing with doing a new property management systems, right? There's a lot of learning curve that needs to be done for you in order for you to create the SOPs and teaching other people how that particular thing work.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
okay. Sounds good. Okay. What advice would you give someone who is just starting out as a realtor?
I think a lot of new realtors nowadays, they think it's a very easy way to make money.
Hmm.
I think that's the big misconception. It's like, oh, all you do is show houses, right? Like, you just call people, show houses, and then boom, money, kind of thing. It is honestly probably harder. Like, I don't know if, me personally, it was harder than the property management stuff.
Really?
Honestly, yeah, because going from ground up, right? I think of it like a deal funnel, right? Like, how do you actually make money as a realtor, right? You have to close on deals, right? That's the bottom of the funnel. That's, everyone's focused on that, right? And then everyone's also focused on, like, but no one's looking at the rest of the funnel, right? How do you get there?
Yeah.
You have to keep people motivated. The client, sometimes there's so many things that go wrong.
Oh, yeah. Buying a house can be very, very stressful for some people.
No, yes. Yes, I know that all too well. And, at the end of the day, it's that's why I like, working with people and, dealing with different personalities, different wants, different needs and stuff like that. That's really at the end of the day, you're like a mini therapist when you
Honestly, sometimes it feels like that.
yeah, you're like, oh no, things are fine. It's okay. There's a little crack here, but inspection will take care of that. You can call a contractor, all that stuff. But yeah, it does feel like, almost like babysitting sometimes too, like depending. But that said, at the end of the day, you are fulfilling a need, which is like you are essentially a teacher for the most part, right? Where if you think about it, right, a lot of these people have never bought a home, right? And also it's usually not for business purposes, usually for the personal purpose, right?
Primary resident.
Primary residence, exactly. Especially for residential real estate. That's primarily what we're talking about here. But that said, is like now you have to inform people, but also motivate them enough to actually take the next step.
Get that Maria in you to push Wes to buy that first Denver property. And this is how you make money and not lose money.
Exactly. So yeah, it's if you take that mindset, like, hey, you're teaching someone, you're coaching someone
Right.
along the process. I think that would probably be my advice to new realtors. Like, it's not easy, and also try it out. Actually try to do it, because sometimes, and I think I remember when I was at this, so here in Pennsylvania, you have to like do a course. You have to get like 75 credits in order for you to even take the test, right? So I remember I went to it's like a classroom, because I remember I tried doing it online.
Yeah, it took me like, I feel you.
Once I was like, I was done because I was already doing building the property management stuff on the side. So I was like,
You need more accountability to be in that right environment.
Exactly.
Not to be like somewhere and be distracted.
He was like, oh, I have 20 minutes. Let me just log in. No, I can't do that. I know myself. I have to go to a physical spot and like separate myself from everything else. So anyway, so I did that thing, and oh my gosh, like I think like I was looking around and I was like, wow, most of the people are not cut out for this. I could already tell. I'm like, it's just like I know it requires a certain amount of like grit and determination to get to, especially if you are playing a living off this income,
Right.
Another thing. So a lot of those people I was with, they were probably doing it on the side, probably a part-time thing, not as serious, which is fine. More power to you. I understand. But if you expect this to be your full-time income, like this is what you're
You got me
off of.
grinding.
Oh, believe me, brother. Believe me, yes. So that's why it's not easy. Try it out. If not, keep your day job.
Yeah.
That's definitely it.
Yeah. So we talked about the past, right? How you first started and the systems that you build up. Talk about the now, where you are just mostly teaching leadership, business development, hiring, and just being a people person and talking to all these your clients, the maybe the tenants, maybe not the tenants, but definitely the people that you hire, and I guess the mentor. Let's talk about the future now. What is next steps for you? What are you looking for to do, I guess, in the next few years or so? Now you have all of this kind of somewhat established.
Yeah. I'm hoping that this part of the company, like, so, like I said, I have my business partner, Steve, so we run like a real estate office, our name Team Win. So we have the property management, I have the buy and sell residential. Those are like the things that we were really working on, but then in the future, so recently we started doing a lot more commercial properties, so commercial real estate as well, and also business brokering. So those are the things that we started getting into, and just trying it out, feeling it out. The same advice I give the new people, right? I'm doing it myself. I'm practicing when I preach, right? It's like we're gonna try it out, see where it goes. We have a couple of stuff like right now, like a couple of businesses under contract right now. It's been pretty nice, and then we're just learning on top of that, like learning that. So that's I don't want to stop working. I love
100%.
I love making a deal. I love just working with people and trying to find like a good solution that works for everyone. And if we end up making money, that's great too. On top of that, it's win-win-win out here.
Team win.
Yeah, team win, right? Exactly.
No puns intended.
So that said, yeah, but that's where we have people, processes, people in place on the side for those businesses. That's it. So we can focus on these things here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where can people find more about you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. You can come to Philadelphia, I guess. We have our own, I guess, meetup.
Tell about the meetup.
Yeah, so we have our own meetup. We are probably doing something similar to this actually, where it's a little more talk show podcast style. It's me, you, and another guy named Han. So he's not that important. I'm kidding. So yeah, so we're all gonna sit down. We all do different aspects of real estate. So as you know, I do property management. You do developing, and Han, still Han, isn't he? He's just an agent, yeah, regular, whatever. But so yeah, just having different perspectives exactly as investors too. We all invest, we all have properties and whatnot, and just like sharing information. Not. Yeah, I'm just like a big proprietor of like, hey, if I have all this information, I might as well just try giving it out, like
Right.
if for anyone who asks. So I love doing that, and just creating this new, I guess, community in terms of getting people started. Because I remember, I guess, kind of what we talked about, like how hard it is, to get started as an investor, and because a lot of biases, it's a lot of like, what's the word I'm looking for, like
Opinions and facts, and it's very hard to combine them into one thing and have the sense of direction because that's what people want when they are listening to something or reading to something. And it's like, just give me the pathways to get from point A to point B. And the point B is like success, right? Because you could get bombarded with all this information, and people have different personal experiences, and that experience might not fit yours. So just because you're taking one advice for this one person, that doesn't necessarily mean that it works from your situations. Whereas if you have someone like you or like Maria or just any other people that can or know your situation, can help you based on that situation from their personal experience and handhold you into that point B, then that way it'll, help you out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that's where you can find us now. Unfortunately, I don't have any socials
It's all good.
or anything like that. But yeah, I'm excited to contribute to this new community that we're trying to grow. And if anyone gets value from it, it's more power to it.
Okay, sounds good. Well, Wes, thank you so much for being on the episode. It's been a really good one.
Yeah. Sorry if I rambled a lot. Yeah, it's all good. Like I'm, I think I'm very passionate about these topics.
We definitely can see that.
Yes.
All right, brother. Signing off. Thank you so much for watching or listening to the Kaizen Blueprint podcast. If you got value from today's episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps us grow and reach more listeners like you. And don't forget to stay connected. Subscribe to our newsletter at kaizenblueprint.com for exclusive insights, resources, and updates. Keep striving for growth, take action. And remember, small, consistent improvements create massive impact. See you on the next episode. Peace out.